I'm Heather Mitchell, 34 years old, standing outside the country club where my parents are celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary. 15 years ago, on my graduation day, they packed my belongings and abandoned me without warning. They moved to Florida with my college fund while I slept in my car. Tonight, in my designer dress and hard-won success, I'm about to walk in unannounced. They've told the family I'm unstable, traveling, or in rehab, anything but the truth. My hand trembles on the door handle. Revenge or closure? I haven't decided yet. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Sometimes the strongest people are those who had to rebuild their lives from nothing, and that's exactly what I'm about to share with you. The day everything changed started like a dream. May 15th, 15 years ago, my high school graduation. I remember the weight of the honor cords around my neck, the satisfying heaviness of achievement. Valedictorian, full academic scholarship to State University. My future stretched before me, bright and promising. My parents, Richard and Karen Mitchell, sat in the third row. I spotted them while delivering my speech about new beginnings and bright futures, ironic, considering what was about to happen. Karen wore her navy blue dress with pearl earrings, clapping politely but without the enthusiasm of other parents who whistled and cheered. Richard checked his watch twice during my 5-minute speech. Something felt off during the ceremony, but I dismissed it as graduation day stress. When we took family photos afterward, Karen kept her designer purse clutched under her arm as if someone might steal it, and Richard answered 3 business calls in 20 minutes. "Can we go now?" Karen asked after the minimum socially acceptable time had passed. "We have a lot to do today." The drive home was 16 minutes of silence. I tried filling it with excited chatter about dorm assignments and orientation, but their responses were clipped, distracted. "We'll talk at home," Richard finally said, turning the radio louder. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed the garage door was open, unusual for security-conscious Richard. Inside sat 3 large suitcases I'd never seen before. "What's going on?" I asked, the first flutter of anxiety rising in my chest. "Come inside," Karen said, her voice emotionless in a way that still haunts me. I walked into the house I'd grown up in and stopped cold in the entryway. The living room was half empty. Family photos were missing from walls, leaving rectangular, clean spots on the faded paint. The antique side table from my grandmother was gone. "Where's all our stuff?" I asked, my graduation cap still in my hands. That's when I saw them 3 cardboard boxes and 2 trash bags near the staircase, with my name scrawled on them in black marker. Richard cleared his throat. "Heather, your mother and I are moving to Florida, today." "Florida? What are you talking about? When were you going to tell me this?" My voice rose with each question. Karen sat primly on the edge of the couch, one of the few remaining pieces of furniture. "We've been planning this for some time. The house sold last month." "Sold? But what about me? What about my room, my things?" I gestured wildly toward the stairs. "We've packed your essentials," Karen said, nodding toward the boxes. "The rest has been donated." "Donated? You got rid of my things without asking me?" Richard stepped forward, always the practical one. "You're 18 now, Heather, an adult. You have your scholarship. It's time for you to be independent." "Independent? I'm supposed to move into the dorms in August. Where am I supposed to go until then?" Karen's response still chills me 15 years later. "That's not our concern anymore. You were never part of our plan, Heather." The words hit like physical blows. Never part of their plan? I was their only child. Richard, ever concerned with appearances, shot Karen an annoyed look before attempting damage control. "What your mother means is that we've worked hard our whole lives. We're still young enough to enjoy retirement. This is our time now. So you're just throwing me away?" My voice sounded small, childlike. "Don't be dramatic," Karen snapped. "We've provided for you for 18 years. Paid for braces, piano lessons, that expensive science camp. We've done our duty." "Duty?" I repeated, tears forming. "I'm your daughter." Richard pulled out his wallet and counted out $500 bills. "This should help until you get settled. Your scholarship covers tuition. You're smart, you'll figure out the rest." I stared at the money he held out. $500 to start a life. $500 to compensate for abandonment. The new owners take possession tomorrow afternoon, Karen added, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. We're catching a flight in 3 hours. You can't just leave me homeless, I shouted, the reality crashing down. This isn't legal. You're 18, Richard repeated firmly. It's completely legal. I fell to my knees then, something I'm not proud of but can't deny. I begged them to reconsider, promised to be less trouble, offered to pay rent. Karen watched with detached interest, like I was a mildly engaging television program. Richard checked his watch repeatedly. We need to go, he finally said to Karen, ignoring my tears. Traffic will be heavy near the airport. They left me there, surrounded by boxes containing the fragments of my life they'd deemed worth keeping. The front door closed with a decisive click. Through the window, I watched them load their expensive luggage into their Mercedes. They didn't look back once. That night, I slept in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, graduation gown stuffed under my head as a pillow, crying until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The morning after graduation brought harsh reality into focus. I woke up cramped in my car's back seat, neck stiff, eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, I imagined it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw the boxes stuffed in my trunk and passenger seat, and the truth crashed down again. My first call was to Jessica Turner, my best friend since 7th grade. They did what? She practically screamed into the phone after I explained my situation. That's insane, Heather. Come over right now. My mom will know what to do. Jessica's family had always been warm and welcoming, but even their generosity had limits. Mrs. Turner hugged me fiercely when I arrived, her face tight with anger at my parents. You can stay in our guest room for now, she said, helping me carry in one of the boxes. But honey, we're leaving for my mother's in Michigan in 3 weeks for the summer. 3 weeks. The ticking clock started immediately. Mr. Turner, an accountant, sat me down that evening to assess my finances. $500 cash, $2,000 in savings from my part-time job at the library. A full academic scholarship that covered tuition and books, but not housing or meals. First things first, he said kindly. Tomorrow we'll go to the bank and make sure your parents don't have access to your accounts. I hadn't even considered that possibility. The thought that they might take what little I had made me physically ill. The next day brought another shock. When I called the university housing office to ask about moving into my dorm early, the administrator sounded confused. Mitchell, Heather Mitchell, I don't show a housing assignment for you. That can't be right, I insisted. I accepted the scholarship package months ago. The academic scholarship, yes, but according to our records, you declined university housing. My hands went cold. I never declined anything. After being transferred 3 times, I learned the truth. Someone my mother, I later confirmed, had logged into my student portal and declined housing, claiming I would be living at home and commuting. With student housing now fully assigned for fall, I was placed on a waitlist with minimal chances of getting a room. The administrator suggested I look for off-campus options, seemingly unaware that apartments near campus were not only expensive, but required parental co-signers, or proof of substantial income, neither of which I had. The financial aid office was my next stop, where I sat across from Mr. Peterson, a balding man whose size suggested I was ruining his day. I need to update my financial information, I explained. My parents have abandoned me, and I'm financially independent now. His expression remained impassive. Do you have documentation proving this independence? I stared blankly. Documentation? They packed my things and left. What kind of documentation would I have? Without legal emancipation papers or proof they've disowned you, you're still considered a dependent based on their income. He shuffled papers on his desk. According to their tax returns, they make too much for you to qualify for additional aid. But they're not supporting me at all, my voice echoed in the small office. They're in Florida. I understand it's frustrating, he said, without sounding like he understood at all. But federal guidelines are very strict. You could try applying for a dependency override, but those are rarely approved without extreme circumstances. Abandonment apparently wasn't extreme enough. While waiting for the painfully slow override process, I took on as many shifts as possible at the mall, working both at a clothing store and the food court. Some nights I slept only 4 hours before dragging myself to the next shift. My meager savings went to a security deposit on a tiny studio apartment, that cost nearly 80% of my monthly income. By the time classes started in August, I was exhausted, malnourished, and falling apart. The dependency override was denied. The scholarship covered my tuition, but textbooks alone cost hundreds. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, calculating every penny. One Tuesday in September, it all became too much. After learning I'd failed my first calculus quiz the valedictorian, I locked myself in a campus bathroom stall and broke down completely. My sobs echoed against the tile walls as I gasped for breath between waves of despair. "Hey, are you okay in there?" A gentle voice came from outside the stall. I couldn't even respond, just cried harder. "I'm Lindsay Parker. I'm a nursing student. Can I help somehow?" Something in her kind tone made me unlock the door. Lindsay was tall with curly auburn hair and concerned green eyes. She sat beside me on the bathroom floor, uncaring about her white uniform pants, and just listened as I poured out my story. "You're staying with me tonight," she declared when I finished. "My roommates and I have a futon in the living room. It's not much, but it's better than that awful apartment you described." Lindsay's cramped apartment housed 3 other nursing students. Their place was chaotic but warm, with study notes taped to every surface and constant coffee brewing. The futon sagged in the middle, but it was the best sleep I'd had in months. 2 days later, they helped me move my few belongings into their apartment. We worked out a rent arrangement I could afford, splitting utilities 5 ways instead of 4. For the first time since graduation day, I didn't feel completely alone. That weekend, I tried calling my parents' cell phones. Both numbers were disconnected. I searched for their new address without success. Finally, I checked social media and found my mother had posted photos tagged New Beginnings showing a beachfront condo with expansive ocean views. They were smiling, tanned, and apparently unbothered by the daughter they'd discarded. I closed my laptop and didn't look back at their profiles for years. Nearly a year after my parents vanished to Florida, I was shelving books at my campus library job when someone called my name. I turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and familiar blue eyes, my father's eyes. "Uncle Sam?" I nearly dropped the psychology textbook I was holding. Sam Mitchell, my father's older brother, pulled me into a bear hug. "Thank God I found you. I've been looking everywhere." We sat in the library's courtyard as Sam explained his unexpected appearance. He lived in Oregon and hadn't spoken to my father in several months, not unusual given their historically strained relationship. But when he called my mother's sister for their new Florida address, he'd learned something disturbing. "Your Aunt Claire told me you were living with her," Sam said, his expression darkening. "She said Richard and Karen told everyone you'd refuse to move to Florida because you didn't want to leave your friends and boyfriend." I laughed bitterly. "Boyfriend? I didn't even date in high school. I was too busy studying." "That's what seemed off to me," Sam nodded. "You were always the responsible one. It didn't make sense you'd suddenly become difficult." When Sam called my parents directly, they'd elaborated on their fiction, claiming I'd been rebellious and ungrateful, insisting on staying behind despite their generous offers to set me up in Florida. They'd painted themselves as heartbroken parents, respecting their adult daughter's wishes. "I knew something wasn't right," Sam said, his voice tight with anger. "Richard has always been selfish, but this," he trailed off, shaking his head. "They told the family I chose this." My hands trembled around my coffee cup. "They abandoned me without warning, and now they're making me sound like an ungrateful brat?" Sam's face flushed with shame. "I should have checked sooner. When Claire gave me some story about you being too busy with college activities to come to the phone, I should have pressed harder." "It's not your fault, Uncle Sam." I reached for his hand. "You're here now." That's when he delivered the second shock of the day. "There's something else you need to know, Heather. Your grandparents, my parents, set up a trust fund for your education before they died. Richard was the trustee until you turned 25. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. A trust fund? But my scholarship? Should never have been necessary. Sam's voice was grim. The trust had enough to cover your full education expenses, including graduate school if you wanted. Richard and Karen have been accessing that money for years. I believe they used it for their Florida condo. The betrayal struck deeper than I thought possible. Not only had they abandoned me, but they'd stolen money specifically designated for my future. Money from grandparents who had loved me. "Can we get it back?" I asked, my mind racing. "I've consulted a lawyer." As trustee, Richard had some discretion, but what he's done clearly violates the trust's purpose. We can take legal action. The idea of suing my own parents felt surreal, but so did sleeping in my car after graduation while they lounged in a beachfront property bought with my education fund. The next day, Sam took me to meet with Bradley Wilson, a lawyer specializing in trust litigation. Bradley was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He listened intently as I shared my story, taking detailed notes. "What they've done is clearly improper," Bradley confirmed after reviewing the trust documents Sam had obtained. "As trustee, your father had fiduciary responsibilities he's violated. We have a strong case." But strong didn't mean easy. Bradley outlined the process ahead: the petitions, the discovery phase, possibly a trial if it couldn't be settled. It would take months, possibly years. "And be prepared," he warned gently. "Family financial disputes get ugly. They'll likely claim you were provided for adequately, that the trust allowed discretionary spending, or that you agreed to some arrangement." "I never agreed to anything," I said firmly. "I believe you," Bradley assured me. "But they'll fight this, especially if they've spent the money and can't easily return it." Despite the warnings, we proceeded. Sam helped cover the initial legal fees, and Bradley agreed to take a percentage of any recovery rather than billing hourly, a blessing given my financial situation. 3 weeks later, Richard and Karen received formal notice of our legal action. Their response came through their own attorney, a partner at a prestigious firm with offices in 3 states. Their strategy was immediately clear: outspend and outlast us. Their lawyer sent a blistering letter suggesting I was ungrateful, unstable, and attempting extortion. They threatened countersuits for defamation. Most disturbingly, they implied they had documentation showing I'd agreed to different living arrangements after graduation, a complete fabrication. Our case hit its first major obstacle when Uncle Sam suffered a massive heart attack just 2 days before his scheduled deposition. He died 3 days later in the hospital without regaining consciousness. I lost more than my strongest ally and witness. I lost the only family member who'd stood up for me. At his funeral in Oregon, I stood apart from the family I barely knew, aware of their curious glances. My parents didn't attend, citing travel difficulties. Without Sam's testimony about family discussions regarding the trust's purpose, our case weakened significantly. Bradley suggested we consider settlement, likely for far less than what had been taken. "Sometimes," he said gently, "the victory is in standing up for yourself, even if the outcome isn't everything you hoped for." 6 months after initiating legal action, I accepted a settlement amounting to less than a third of the original trust value. After legal fees, it barely covered my remaining college expenses. But it was a small acknowledgement of the wrong done to me, and enough to ease my immediate financial strain. More importantly, the process forced my parents to face what they'd done, even if only through legal proxies. They couldn't pretend I'd chosen to stay behind anymore. The family knew the truth. But the victory felt hollow. No amount of money could repair what had been broken when the 2 people who should have loved me most chose themselves instead. By junior year, the settlement money had provided some breathing room, but I was still working part-time at the university library. One evening, while reshelving books in the computer science section, I noticed Professor Diana Lawrence struggling with an armful of research materials. "Let me help you with those," I offered, taking some of the heavy volumes. Diana, a renowned computer science professor with steel gray hair and piercing intelligence, thanked me and then paused, studying my face. "You're Heather Mitchell, aren't you? From my advanced algorithms class last semester." I nodded, surprised she remembered one student among hundreds. "Your final project on predictive data patterns was exceptional," she said. "I've been meaning to speak with you. My research assistant just graduated mid-year. Would you be interested in the position?" That chance encounter changed everything. Working with Diana exposed me to cutting-edge research in data security. While helping with her projects, I developed an algorithm that could detect and prevent certain types of data breaches before they occurred, something commercial security systems weren't yet doing effectively. "This is remarkable," Diana said one evening, reviewing my code. "Have you considered patenting this?" I hadn't. The idea that my work might have commercial value was entirely new to me. "Patents cost money," I said hesitantly. Diana waved away my concern. "The university has an innovation office that helps students patent promising work. They take a percentage, but they handle the legal complexities. 2 months later, I found myself in a meeting with Ryan Campbell, a charismatic tech entrepreneur visiting campus to scout new technologies. At 28, he had already launched and sold 2 successful startups. Tall and confident with perfectly styled hair, Ryan had the polished look of someone accustomed to boardrooms. "Your algorithm addresses a major security gap," he said, after reviewing my presentation. "I'd like to discuss building a company around this technology." Diana had coached me for this meeting, encouraging me to stand firm on my ownership stake. "Remember," she'd said, "this is your intellectual creation. Don't let anyone minimize your contribution." With Diana's guidance, I negotiated a founding arrangement with Ryan and 2 graduate students who could help develop the commercial application. I retained the largest equity stake and the title of Chief Technology Officer. For the first time, I glimpsed a future beyond just surviving. The early months of our startup, SecureShield, were both exhilarating and terrifying. We worked from a cramped office space barely larger than a storage closet, living on coffee and determination. Initial investor meetings yielded more rejections than interest. "They're not seeing the full potential," Ryan insisted after our 5th rejection. "We need someone who understands disruptive security technology." Diana, who had become far more than a professor to me, mentioned her brother during one of our weekly mentoring dinners. "Nathan Lawrence runs a venture capital firm specializing in cybersecurity. He's visiting next month. I could arrange a meeting." Nathan, sharing his sister's sharp intelligence but with a more corporate demeanor, grilled us mercilessly about every aspect of our technology and business model. Just when I thought we'd failed another pitch, he closed his laptop and smiled. "I've seen 50 security startups this year," he said. "Yours is the only one solving a problem companies don't even realize they have yet." That's where the big opportunities lie. 2 weeks later, we secured our first major investment, $1.5 million in exchange for 15% of the company. That night, the team celebrated at an upscale restaurant, my first time eating somewhere with cloth napkins since before graduation. As everyone toasted our success, Diana pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you, Heather. You've overcome challenges that would break many people." The genuine maternal pride in her eyes brought unexpected tears to mine. "I couldn't have done it without your help." "No," she said firmly. "I opened a door, but you walked through it on your own strength. Never forget that." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Diana shared something personal. "I recognized something in you that first day in the library," she confessed. "The same determined self-sufficiency I developed after my own family fell apart." She told me about her parents' bitter divorce when she was 16, how she'd been caught in the crossfire of their mutual hatred until both eventually withdrew from her life entirely. "For years, I thought if I achieved enough, they'd finally see me," she said. "It took a long time to realize their limitations weren't a reflection of my worth." "How did you make peace with it?" I asked, desperately needing to know there was a path forward. "I stopped waiting for closure from people unable to provide it," she said simply. "Instead, I built a life rich with chosen connections. And I forgave them not because they deserved forgiveness, but because resentment was taking up space I needed for better things." Her words stayed with me, though I wasn't ready to embrace forgiveness yet. The wound still felt too raw, the betrayal too profound. By the time I graduated with honors in computer science, SecureShield had secured 2 major corporate clients and a valuation of $3.2 million. Diana sat in the front row at graduation, cheering loudly as I crossed the stage. The seats where parents typically sat were empty, but I no longer felt the absence so acutely. I had built something new, not just a company, but a life with people who chose to support me rather than abandon me. As I moved my tassel from right to left, I silently thanked the 18-year-old girl who had slept in her car rather than giving up. She couldn't have imagined this moment, but her determination had made it possible. 2 years after graduation, SecureShield had grown exponentially. We had 28 employees, offices in a downtown high-rise, and a valuation of just over $5 million. My algorithm had expanded into a comprehensive security platform used by mid-sized companies across 3 countries. At 24, I had achieved more professional success than most people twice my age. Yet beneath the company's thriving surface, tensions were brewing. Ryan Campbell, once my enthusiastic champion, had begun pushing for a different direction, one that prioritized rapid growth over the security integrity I considered fundamental. "We need to scale faster," he argued during a tense executive meeting. "Our competitors are gaining ground while we perfect features most clients don't even understand the value of." "Those features are what make our security actually work," I countered, frustrated by his increasing focus on sales over substance. "I won't compromise the core technology just to add client logos." The disagreement might have remained professional if I hadn't discovered Ryan's secret meetings with our largest competitor, DataGuard. An alert developer showed me emails accidentally left on a shared server messages discussing acquisition of key assets and management restructuring. When I confronted Ryan in the boardroom the next day, I expected denials. Instead, he launched an offensive I never saw coming. "The board needs to understand Heather's emotional instability is threatening this company's future," he said coldly to our four-person board, speaking as if I weren't sitting right there. "Her paranoia about security threats is paralyzing our growth. Her refusal to consider acquisition offers is irrational." Michael Hayes, our company attorney and board member, interrupted sharply. "That's enough, Ryan. Personal attacks aren't appropriate in this forum." But Ryan continued, his handsome face twisting with disdain. "The company has outgrown its founding technology. Heather hasn't. She's clinging to control because this company is all she has." The boardroom fell silent. Everyone there knew pieces of my background, the abandoned scholarship student who'd built something from nothing. Ryan had weaponized my personal history against me. Michael called for a brief recess. In the hallway, he pulled me aside. "He's setting up a hostile takeover," he warned. "We need to investigate what he's been doing with DataGuard immediately." The next 2 weeks revealed the extent of Ryan's betrayal. He had shared proprietary code snippets with DataGuard's CTO. He had attempted to access my original algorithm documentation, likely looking for weaknesses in my patent protection. Most disturbingly, he had been quietly meeting with potential investors, suggesting that under new leadership his secure shield could triple its valuation. We called an emergency board meeting, presenting evidence of Ryan's corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty. The board voted to remove him as CEO immediately. His parting words in that boardroom still echo in my mind. "No wonder your own parents didn't want you. You're impossible to work with." The casual cruelty stunned everyone present. Michael actually stood up, his normally composed legal demeanor cracking. "You're done here, Campbell. Security will escort you out." But Ryan wasn't finished. He sued for wrongful termination, claiming I had fabricated evidence against him out of personal animosity. His legal team, expensive and aggressive, demanded access to my personal and professional history to establish patterns of behavior. Somehow, Ryan had learned details about my parents. His lawyers subpoenaed my childhood medical records, highlighting therapy sessions I'd attended after struggling with anxiety in middle school. They painted me as emotionally unstable, suggesting my abandonment issues had caused me to irrationally turn against Ryan when he proposed the company move in a new direction. Most shocking of all, Ryan's legal team produced a declaration from Richard and Karen Mitchell, my parents, stating I had difficulty accepting authority and created conflict when I didn't get my way. The realization that Ryan had actually contacted my estranged parents and that they had willingly helped him felt like being abandoned all over again. The court case dragged on for months, draining company resources and my personal energy. The stress manifested physically: weight loss, insomnia, constant headaches. I began experiencing panic attacks for the first time since freshman year of college. The turning point came during a deposition when Michael executed a brilliant legal strategy. He had meticulously documented Ryan's communications with DataGuard, creating a timeline that proved Ryan had been planning his move for months. When presented with this evidence under oath, Ryan's carefully constructed narrative began unraveling. The final blow came when Michael produced testimony from DataGuard's former CTO, who admitted Ryan had offered SecureShield's proprietary technology in exchange for a guaranteed executive position after acquisition. 3 weeks later, Ryan's lawsuit collapsed. The court ruled decisively in our favor, even awarding SecureShield damages for the attempted corporate espionage. The legal victory should have felt triumphant. Instead, it left me emotionally drained. The case had generated significant media attention in tech circles, with headlines like "Security Startup Drama," Founder fights back and Secure Shield CEO ousts co-founder in corporate showdown. These stories inevitably mentioned my unusual background, the abandoned scholarship student turned tech entrepreneur. Some portrayed it as an inspiring success story. Others used it to speculate about how my troubled past might have influenced the company conflict. One evening, alone in my downtown apartment, I found myself obsessively reading article comments, many questioning my emotional stability based on Ryan's court allegations. The room began to spin, my heart racing uncontrollably as I struggled to breathe. I recognized the symptoms from years before a full-blown panic attack, my first in years. As I curled into a ball on my expensive couch, gasping for breath in my penthouse apartment, the irony wasn't lost on me. I had achieved external success beyond my wildest dreams, yet inside, I was still that vulnerable 18-year-old sleeping in her car, wondering why she wasn't enough for her parents to love. Professional achievement, I realized, hadn't healed the deeper wounds. It had just given me better armor to hide them. 5 years after the lawsuit with Ryan, Secure Shield had transformed completely. We had weathered the storm of negative publicity and emerged stronger, with me firmly established as CEO. Our security platform protected data for Fortune 500 companies across 3 continents. My personal net worth had climbed to uncomfortable heights as the company's valuation reached $75 million. At 29, I had become what Forbes magazine called a rising star in tech security. Their profile featured me in my corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The photographer had captured what appeared to be a confident, successful woman in a tailored suit. No one would guess that woman still checked the locks on her door 3 times each night or struggled to fully trust anyone in her inner circle. My luxurious downtown penthouse should have been a sanctuary. Instead, its vastness often felt lonely. I decorated it impeccably with the help of a professional designer, but it rarely felt like home. Some nights I found myself sleeping on the couch instead of my king-sized bed, the smaller space somehow more comforting. Dr. Rachel Goldman, my therapist of 2 years, called these trauma echoes moments when past wounds reverberated into present success. Financial security doesn't automatically create emotional security, she explained during one of our weekly sessions. You've built impressive external safeguards, but the internal work is different. Through therapy, I'd begun addressing the deep trust issues that had followed me since graduation day. I'd made progress, particularly in professional relationships, but personal connections remained challenging. The one exception was Michael Hayes. After defending Secure Shield against Ryan's lawsuit, Michael had remained as our chief legal counsel. Over shared late nights preparing for investor meetings and celebration dinners after major contracts, our professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship, then something more. At 34, Michael was 5 years my senior, with a quiet confidence I found steadying. He never pushed when I needed space, never took offense when my trust issues surfaced. Unlike anyone else in my life, he understood the complexity of my past without trying to fix it. 6 months into our relationship, I was still adjusting to the vulnerability of letting someone truly know me when my carefully constructed life faced another disruption. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Heather, it's been too long. I'd love to reconnect. Coffee this week? Your cousin, Amy Mitchell. I stared at the message for a full minute. Amy was my father's niece, Uncle Sam's daughter. We had been close as children during summer visits, but I hadn't heard from her since before my parents' abandonment. She would be around 30 now. The timing felt suspicious. After years of silence from my extended family, why reach out now when Secure Shield was making headlines? My instinct was to delete the message. Instead, I forwarded it to Michael with the subject line, "Suspicious timing?" His response was measured. Could be innocent, could be phishing. Meet somewhere public, share minimal information, see what she wants, trust your instincts. After 3 days of deliberation, I agreed to meet Amy at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory, far from both my home and office. She was waiting when I arrived, recognizable from childhood but now an adult with honey blonde hair and my father's blue eyes. She stood awkwardly when she saw me, hesitating between a handshake and hug. I chose the handshake. "You look amazing," she said after we'd ordered. "I've been following your success. It's incredible what you've accomplished." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "How's your family?" Amy filled me in on her life, married, one child, working as a nurse in the same city. She never mentioned my parents until I finally asked directly. Do they know you're meeting me? Amy flushed slightly. No, we don't really talk anymore, not since Dad died. She explained that Richard had caused problems with Uncle Sam's estate, contesting the will in ways that had created lasting family rifts. The way he treated Dad's memory after everything. I couldn't forgive that. Something in her genuine distress lowered my guard slightly. Over the next hour, she shared her own grievances against my father, painting a picture consistent with the selfish man I knew. By the time we finished our coffee, I felt cautiously optimistic that her interest might be genuine. Over the next several months, Amy and I met occasionally for lunch or coffee. I remained guarded, sharing selected information about my life but enjoying the connection to someone who remembered my childhood. She never asked for money or special favors, never mentioned investment opportunities. Perhaps, I thought, this was one family relationship worth salvaging. Then came the betrayal. SecureShield's security team flagged unusual access patterns on my laptop. Someone had been copying files when the computer was unlocked specifically, browsing through acquisition offers and financial projections. The security logs showed the unauthorized access occurred during 3 separate occasions all afternoons when Amy had visited my penthouse for coffee. I felt physically ill reviewing the evidence. While I'd been in the kitchen or bathroom, my cousin had systematically searched my computer for valuable corporate information. I confronted her during what she thought was another casual visit. The moment I placed the security logs on the coffee table between us, her expression shifted from confusion to guilt. Who are you selling information to, Amy? I asked, voice steady despite my internal turmoil. Her composure crumbled entirely. Through tears, she confessed that Richard had orchestrated the reconnection. My father was in financial trouble, failed investments, mounting debts. He'd learned of SecureShield's success and sent Amy to gather inside information that might help him either blackmail me or profit from advanced knowledge of corporate decisions. I never should have agreed, she sobbed. But he threatened to contest Mom's life insurance if I didn't help. I didn't copy anything important, I swear. I couldn't go through with it. The security logs confirmed her claim that she'd browsed but not actually extracted sensitive documents. Still, the betrayal cut deep, not Amy's so much as the confirmation that my father was still trying to exploit me, even from a distance. I'm so ashamed, Amy whispered. I'll understand if you never want to see me again. Part of me wanted to call security, to have her physically removed from my home and my life. Instead, I found myself responding with unexpected calm. I'm not pressing charges, Amy, but I need you to leave now, and I need you to deliver a message to Richard. Her tear-streaked face registered surprise at being offered any mercy. Tell him I know what he tried to do. Tell him it failed. And tell him if he ever attempts to contact me or harm my company again, I won't be so understanding. After she left, I sat alone in my penthouse, strangely composed. Where I expected to feel devastated by yet another betrayal, I instead felt oddly empowered. I had protected myself. I had recognized the threat and neutralized it without becoming vindictive. Later that week, I made an anonymous donation through my foundation, enough to pay off my parents' mortgage, which my investigator had discovered was in foreclosure. I included no note, no indication of the source, just electronic payment directly to their mortgage company. It wasn't forgiveness. It was demonstration. I knew about their financial troubles. I could affect their lives if I chose to. And unlike them, I chose not to exploit vulnerability. For the first time, I held power in the relationship, even if they didn't know it. That knowledge brought a strange sense of closure I hadn't expected. At 33, I sold SecureShield to a tech giant for a sum that still seems surreal when I see it in my investment accounts. The company I built from desperation and determination is now a security division of a household name corporation, with me retained as a consultant rather than day-to-day leader. Michael and I celebrated with an intimate dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first official date 3 years earlier. Now my fiancé, he raised his champagne glass in a toast. To building something that matters, he said. My phone buzzed during dessert, an automated alert from my email. I would have ignored it, but the subject line caught my attention. Mitchell family 35th anniversary celebration. It wasn't addressed to me personally, rather. It was a mass invitation sent to an old email account I maintained for family contact but rarely checked. The invitation announced Richard and Karen Mitchell's 35th wedding anniversary gala, to be held at the Lakeside Country Club in 3 months. "Everything okay?" Michael asked, noticing my expression. "My parents are celebrating their marriage's longevity," I said, showing him the screen. Ironic, considering they abandoned their only child. Later that night, curiosity drove me to investigate further. Social media revealed that after some apparent financial difficulties, the ones that had prompted Richard to send Amy spying my parents had recovered nicely. Richard had secured a position with a real estate investment firm. Karen was prominently involved with several exclusive social clubs. Their online presence portrayed the perfect upper-middle-class retirement, golf outings, charity galas, cruises to exotic locations. In none of their hundreds of photos was there any acknowledgement of a daughter. Further digging revealed something that hit me like a physical blow. Different family members' posts contained contradictory information about me. To some, my parents claimed I was traveling the world. To others, they suggested I was unstable, and they maintained limited contact for their own well-being. In one cousin's post, Karen had commented that we support Heather through her ongoing treatment program. The realization that they had spent 15 years actively lying about me, not just avoiding mention of me, but creating elaborate fictional narratives, awakened something I thought I'd put to rest. They hadn't just abandoned me, they had erased and rewritten me. I hired a private investigator to learn more about their current lives. His report was comprehensive: their country club membership, their social circle, details of the upcoming anniversary gala, where 200 guests would celebrate their lifetime of dedication. Michael found me at 3 a.m., still reviewing the investigator's findings in my home office. "This isn't healthy, Heather," he said gently. "You've built an amazing life. Why let them pull you back into their drama?" "Because they're still controlling the narrative," I said, surprised by the intensity in my voice. "They abandoned me, stole from me, and now they're celebrating their perfect marriage, while painting me as either absent by choice or mentally unstable. And what would change if people knew the truth? I would have a voice," I said simply. "My story wouldn't belong to them anymore." The plan formed gradually over the following weeks. I would attend the anniversary gala uninvited. I would be calm, composed, and truthful. I would reclaim my narrative without becoming the angry, unstable daughter they had fictionally created. Michael worried about the emotional toll such a confrontation might take. "You've worked so hard to build your peace," he reminded me. "Is this worth disrupting that?" I brought the question to Dr. Goldman during our next session. After listening to my reasoning, she asked carefully, "What outcome are you hoping for?" "Not reconciliation," I said immediately. "I don't expect or want that." "Then what?" I thought about it before answering. "Completion. The story of me and them has been written entirely by them for 15 years. I want to write the final chapter, then close the book for good." Dr. Goldman nodded thoughtfully. "That can be healthy, if approached with the right expectations. Not everyone gets storybook closure with family trauma. Sometimes we have to create our own endings." The weeks before the gala were filled with careful preparation. I selected a designer dress in deep blue that projected confidence without flashiness. I arranged for professional hair and makeup. I rehearsed what I might say if confronted with various scenarios. Michael offered repeatedly to accompany me. "You don't have to face them alone," he insisted. The night before the event, anxiety kept me awake. Doubts crept in. Was I making a mistake? Would confronting them publicly only reinforce their claims about my instability? Was I secretly hoping for an apology I would never receive? At dawn, I made my final decision, calling Michael as early as I dared. "I've decided to go alone," I told him. "This is my story to finish." His hesitation was brief but noticeable. "I'll be waiting at home with ice cream and a shoulder to cry on, no matter how it goes." That simple promise to be there afterward, regardless of outcome, crystallized why Michael was different from anyone who had come before. He didn't need to accompany me into battle to support me through the war. Dressed and ready that evening, I took one last look at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the shell-shocked 18-year-old who had slept in her car, or even the guarded entrepreneur who had built walls around her success. I saw someone whole, neither defined by abandonment nor running from its shadow. For the first time, I felt truly ready to face my past without being consumed by it. The Lakeside Country Club exuded old-money elegance, manicured grounds, valet parking, a fountain illuminated by soft lighting at the entrance. I handed my keys to the attendant, straightened my shoulders, and walked into the lion's den. The anniversary celebration occupied the club's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables dressed in ivory linens. A string quartet played softly in the corner. A large photo display near the entrance showcased Richard and Karen through their 35 years together, college sweethearts, their wedding, vacations, retirement. No photos included me. I paused at the display, studying my mother's face. Karen looked older but still maintained the polished appearance that had been her armor-perfect blonde highlights, tasteful jewelry, practiced smile. In recent photos, my father's hair had gone completely gray, his formerly athletic build softened with age and prosperity. They hadn't noticed me yet. They stood near the center of the room, greeting guests who approached with congratulatory hugs and handshakes. Karen laughed at something, an elegantly dressed woman said, touching her arm with practiced warmth. Richard beamed beside her, every inch the proud husband. For a moment, I simply observed them, these strangers who had created then discarded me. From a distance, they looked like any other successful couple celebrating a milestone. No one watching would imagine what they had done 15 years earlier. Taking a deep breath, I moved through the crowd toward them. Conversations quieted as I passed. A few curious glances followed me, an unknown face at a family celebration. I maintained eye contact with my targets, ignoring the whispers that trailed in my wake. Karen saw me first. The recognition in her eyes was immediate, followed by naked shock that drained all color from her face. Her champagne glass tilted dangerously in her manicured hand. Richard, noticing her expression, turned to follow her gaze. When our eyes met, he physically recoiled, spilling his drink on his expensive suit. The small circle of guests around them fell silent, sensing the sudden tension without understanding its source. I stopped directly in front of them, close enough to see the pulse pounding in Karen's throat and the sweat beading on Richard's forehead. "Hello, Mother." "Father," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Congratulations on 35 years. Karen recovered first, her socialite training kicking in despite her evident distress. "Heather, what a surprise!" Her voice strained for normalcy. "We didn't know you were coming." "I wasn't invited," I replied simply. The awkward silence extended until an older woman, my Aunt Patricia, I realized stepped forward with a confused smile. "Heather, is that really you? We were told you couldn't come." "Couldn't come?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or wasn't welcome?" Richard finally found his voice, placing a restraining hand on Karen's arm. "Perhaps we should speak privately," he suggested, his eyes darting nervously to the growing circle of onlookers. "Why?" I asked, maintaining my composure. "I'm just here to celebrate with family. Isn't that what tonight is about? Family?" Karen's face hardened. "Heather, please, this isn't the time or place for whatever this is." "When would be a good time, Mother? Perhaps during my high school graduation? Or maybe when you packed my belongings and abandoned me without warning? Was that a more appropriate time?" A collective gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. "Heather, you're causing a scene. Let's discuss this in private like adults." I didn't budge. I became an adult the day you left me homeless. I've earned the right to speak my truth openly. Aunt Patricia looked between us, confusion etching deeper lines in her face. "Richard, what is she talking about?" "You told us Heather was traveling abroad." "Last Christmas, they told me she was in graduate school," another relative interjected. "In February, Karen said she was taking time off for health reasons," someone else added. Karen's perfect facade cracked further. "This is ridiculous. Heather has always been difficult. She's clearly still struggling with reality." "Am I?" I reached into my clutch and withdrew several folded documents, copies of the legal settlement, my parents' foreclosure notice, screenshots of their contradictory stories about me. "Would you like me to share what's real? I have evidence." Richard attempted damage control, addressing the confused onlookers. "My daughter has had emotional difficulties since adolescence. We've tried to support her while respecting her privacy." "Support me?" I interrupted. my composure intact but voice rising slightly. "You stole my education fund. You told family I abandoned you when you were the ones who left me sleeping in my car after graduation." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Every eye was on our family drama unfolding in real time. Karen's demeanor shifted from defensive to offensive. "You always were dramatic, Heather. Always needing attention, making everything about you. Even tonight, our anniversary celebration, you couldn't let us have one special moment without inserting yourself." Her attack, so familiar in its dismissiveness, somehow strengthened rather than wounded me. I smiled slightly. I lived without any family for 15 years. I built a successful tech company that recently sold for 8 figures. I've created a foundation that helps abandoned young adults find housing and education. I didn't come here for attention, Mother. I came here for truth. Richard, seeing Karen's approach failing, tried a different tactic. His shoulders slumped, his expression morphing into contrition. "We made a terrible mistake," he admitted, voice breaking. "We were selfish. We wanted freedom from responsibility. We told ourselves you were strong enough to handle it." Karen shot him a venomous look, clearly unprepared for his confession. "We've regretted it," he continued, reaching toward me but stopping short of actual contact. "Every day, we've regretted what we did." "Yet not enough to contact me," I noted. "Not enough to stop lying to the family about me." An elderly woman I recognized as my grandmother's sister approached slowly, her expression thunderous despite her frail appearance. "Is this true, Richard? You abandoned your own daughter?" The confrontation expanded beyond just my parents and me, as family members began taking sides. Most expressed shock and dismay at my parents' actions, though a few, Karen's sister among them, suggested there must be more to the story. Through it all, I maintained the calm I had worked so hard to cultivate. When Richard tried to steer me toward a side room again, I firmly refused. When Karen attempted to paint me as mentally unstable, I responded with documented facts rather than matching her emotion. The defining moment came when I revealed my final piece of information. "Last year, when your mortgage was in foreclosure and you sent cousin Amy to spy on me for financial information, did you tell the family about that too? Or did you maintain the fiction of your perfect retirement while facing bankruptcy?" Karen blanched. Richard's face crumpled entirely. "You were foreclosing? After everything you took from her?" my grandmother's sister demanded, outrage overcoming her usual reserve. "We've had some investment setbacks," Richard mumbled. "What they don't know," I continued, addressing the stunned gathering rather than my parents directly, "is that an anonymous donor paid off their mortgage last December. That donor was me." The revelation silenced even Karen. For the first time in my memory, she appeared completely lost for words. "You paid our mortgage?" Richard finally asked, his voice barely audible. "Why would you do that after everything?" I met his gaze directly. "Not because you deserved it, not even for forgiveness. I did it to show myself that I'm nothing like you, that I would never abandon someone in their moment of greatest vulnerability, even someone who had hurt me deeply." In that moment, I finally asked the question that had haunted me for 15 years. "Why wasn't I enough for you to love?" The rawest silence yet descended over the ballroom. In my parents' faces, I saw not answers but their own unresolved damage, people who had never developed the capacity for selfless love, who had viewed parenthood as a transaction rather than a commitment. No explanation they could offer would ever be sufficient. And for the first time, I truly understood. Their limitations weren't a reflection of my worth. With nothing more to say, I turned and walked toward the exit, my steps steady and purposeful. Behind me, the carefully orchestrated celebration had transformed into something else entirely, a family reckoning 15 years overdue. I had reclaimed my narrative. The book was finally closed. 1 week after the anniversary gala confrontation, I sat in a corner booth at a quiet coffee shop watching the door. Richard had called 3 days earlier asking to meet. After consulting with both Michael and Dr. Goldman, I had agreed with boundaries firmly in place. Public location, limited time. No Karen. He arrived precisely on time, looking older than he had at the celebration. The confidence that had always characterized his presence seemed diminished. He ordered coffee with trembling hands before sitting across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he began, his voice subdued. I nodded but remained silent, giving him space to continue. What happened at the country club? He hesitated. I deserved it. We both did, but I'm not here to make excuses. I want to try to explain, even though I know explanation isn't justification. Over the next 40 minutes, Richard shared aspects of himself I'd never known. His own father had abandoned their family when Richard was 12, disappearing with his secretary and starting a new family in another state. His mother had fallen apart, leaving teenage Richard to essentially raise himself and his younger brother, Sam. I swore I'd never be like my father, he said, staring into his cooling coffee. But I also swore I'd never feel trapped like my mother did. When Karen became pregnant with you, it wasn't planned. We nearly didn't get married. He described years of resentment building beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, resentment toward the parental responsibilities that had curtailed their freedom, financial stress that limited their lifestyle, opportunities passed up to provide stability. By your senior year, we were counting down the days until we could finally live the life we wanted, he admitted. We told ourselves you were grown, that launching you into college was the final parental duty. The trust fund. It seemed like money just sitting there when we could use it to finally be happy. His selfishness was still evident even in his confession, but I also glimpsed something I hadn't before: a man shaped by his own childhood wounds, perpetuating cycles he lacked the emotional tools to break. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Richard said finally. I don't deserve it, but I am genuinely sorry, Heather, not just because I was exposed or because the family now knows what we did. I'm sorry because I failed you completely as a father, and I have to live with that knowledge every day for the rest of my life. I studied him, this older, diminished version of the father who had once seemed so formidable. Thank you for your apology, I said carefully. I can't offer forgiveness right now. Maybe someday, but not yet. He nodded, accepting this boundary. Would you be open to occasional contact? Perhaps coffee every few months? I'd like to know you as the remarkable adult you've become, even though I had no hand in that. The request surprised me. I need to think about that, I answered honestly. This is just one conversation after 15 years of absence. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever boundaries you need. As our meeting concluded, I asked about Karen. She won't be reaching out, he confirmed. She still believes you humiliated her intentionally. She can't see beyond that. I wasn't surprised. Karen had always been constitutionally incapable of accepting responsibility for her actions. Unlike Richard, she lacked even the capacity to recognize her own failings. Later that week, during my session with Dr. Goldman, I processed the complex emotions the meeting had stirred. I always imagined confronting them would bring this cathartic resolution, I admitted. But it's messier than that. I feel unfinished. Dr. Goldman nodded understanding. Healing isn't linear, and it rarely follows the narrative arc we expect. Some relationships can be mended, others remain broken. The healing happens within you, not within the relationship. I think I'm ready to focus on the future now, I said, realizing the truth in the words as I spoke them. The wedding planning, the foundation work, building a life with Michael, that sounds like progress, she affirmed. Not because you're ignoring the past, but because you're choosing not to let it dominate your present. The following months brought a welcome shift in focus. Michael and I finalized plans for our intimate wedding at a historic garden venue. Diana Lawrence, still my most trusted mentor, agreed to play the traditional mother of the bride role in the ceremony. You're the closest thing to family I have, I told her when asking. The honor is entirely mine, she replied, embracing me warmly. But Heather, you've built a beautiful chosen family around you. Look at how many people love you authentically. She was right. My guest list included friends who had supported me through various chapters of my journey: Lindsay and her nursing school roommates who had shared their apartment during my darkest days, Bradley Wilson, the lawyer who had helped me recover part of my trust fund, colleagues from SecureShield who had become true friends. The day before our wedding, as final preparations were underway, an unexpected letter arrived addressed in familiar handwriting: Karen's. I set it aside, unwilling to let anything disrupt the happiness of our wedding weekend. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for: intimate, joyful, surrounded by people who had chosen to be part of my life, rather than those obligated by blood. Michael's vows brought tears not just to my eyes but to many of our guests. You taught me that family is built through choice, commitment, and love, he said. I choose you, commit to you, and love you today and every day forward. 2 weeks later, after returning from our honeymoon in New Zealand, I finally opened Karen's letter. I read it sitting in our garden, sunshine warming my face, the security of my chosen life buffering me against whatever words she had written. The letter was shorter than I expected and characteristically self-focused. Karen acknowledged what she called missteps in parenting but qualified them with lengthy explanations about her own unhappiness in motherhood and what she perceived as my teenage emotional distance. She expressed embarrassment about the public scene at the anniversary party but stopped short of actual responsibility for the circumstances that had led to it. The final paragraph contained the closest thing to reconciliation she could offer. While I cannot change the past, I would be open to occasional contact if you feel it would be beneficial to your healing process. I folded the letter and returned it to its envelope, feeling neither anger nor disappointment, just a calm clarity. Karen remained fundamentally unchanged, incapable of genuine empathy or accountability. She saw potential reconciliation as something that would benefit my healing rather than recognizing her own need for growth. During my final session with Dr. Goldman before transitioning to less frequent check-ins, I shared my decision regarding both parents. I'll maintain minimal, boundaried contact with Richard, I explained. Quarterly coffee meetings, perhaps, but I'm declining Karen's offer. Some relationships can't be salvaged, and that's okay. That sounds like a healthy decision based on careful consideration rather than reaction, Dr. Goldman observed. The goal of therapy was never to force reconciliation, but to help you make choices based on your well-being rather than unresolved trauma. That evening, Michael and I finalized plans for the Heather Mitchell Foundation's first major initiative, a housing and education support program for young adults aged 18 to 24 who lacked family support. The program would provide not just financial assistance but mentorship, life skills training, and mental health resources. We'll help 50 students this year, I told Michael as we reviewed the budget. Next year, we can double that. You're turning your worst experience into something beautiful for others, he observed, squeezing my hand. That's real transformation. In the years since confronting my parents, I've maintained those quarterly meetings with Richard. They're not always comfortable, but they've evolved into a careful, limited relationship, not father-daughter in the traditional sense, but a connection nonetheless. He's met Michael, contributed to the foundation, and worked to understand the person I've become without him. Karen remains on the periphery by mutual choice. We exchange brief messages on birthdays and holidays, formal, distant acknowledgments that maintain the smallest thread of contact without reopening old wounds. I no longer wait for the parents who abandoned me to somehow transform into the parents I deserved. Instead, I've surrounded myself with genuine connections: my husband, my mentor, friends who have proven their love through actions rather than obligation. The greatest freedom came with accepting that my family story wouldn't have a fairy tale ending. Some wounds don't completely heal, but they can become part of your strength rather than your vulnerability. The abandoned girl sleeping in her car helped create the woman who now helps others find their way forward. If you're watching this and struggling with family wounds of your own, remember that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means building something new from the broken pieces. Your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it. Your future isn't limited by those who couldn't imagine it for you. Thank you for witnessing my story. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that abandonment isn't the end of their story, it might just be the difficult beginning of something remarkable. Hit subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience, and leave a comment sharing how you've transformed your own difficult experiences into strength. We rise by lifting others, and sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer is the truth that survival is possible, healing is possible, and a beautiful life is possible even after the people who should have loved you the most let you down.